For today's episode, we are focusing on answering one question. That question, how long will this pandemic last? And I'll go ahead and share that the answer to that could be 3 weeks. That's it. 1, 2, 3. I'm Kendall. This is The Objective, and we are on day 973, it seems, of the pandemic. Today's episode is going to focus on a tool called the hammer and the dance. Really, it's a model, right? It's a tool for explaining what will happen, what could happen with the pandemic. So in the pursuit of that, we're going to have 3 objectives to answer that one question. Number 1, we're going to discuss the hammer and the dance and what it means. Number 2, we're going to see if we actually need it, because it's a pretty strong prescription. So we're going to see if we actually need it. And then number 3, we're going to look and see what happens if we don't follow it, which is what we're doing right now. So it's sort of a predictive of what happens if we keep doing whatever it is that we are doing presently. And also, at the end of this video, I'll have, there's a project I'm working on that I would love you guys' thoughts on. I would love to get your feedback on. So if you're interested in that, definitely make sure you check that out. First, we have a very simple XY axis, right? Time on the bottom, cases on the side, all right? So that's what we're showing. So first, let's show the outbreak of this virus. Most of us are familiar with that. It's the exponential curve. So when we draw that first line, we get this, right? This is the very beginning. There's 1 or 2 cases, if you remember, right? It was like, what is this? Nothing going on. And then before we knew it, as not very much time passed, then it started growing exponentially. The first thing that we had to do is flatten the curve. If you remember hearing that quite a bit, right? Flatten the curve, flatten the curve, flatten the curve. And that's what the next phase is. And this is what that looks like, right? This is when we first started getting a lot of cases, right? When this went up back in late February, early March, this was our rallying cry. Let's flatten the curve. But if you notice, these are the number of cases. This is 0 cases. This is way more than 0 cases. So flattening the curve is really just part 1 of what it is that we're trying to do, right? Because eventually we want to get down to 0 cases. So what is the hammer? The hammer is the blue line I'm about to draw. And this precipitous decline here, this is the hammer, right? It literally is as the name sounds. It is lowering the hammer. What we want to do is we want to just immediately stranglehold the virus. We want to keep it from getting any foothold whatsoever in a community. Now, it does take pretty extreme measures to get here, right? You do have to do things like literally like staying in your home for days on end and not leaving, right? You know, just going out to your back garden, but not going to the grocery store, not going out, right? It's a pretty extreme situation. We have seen this. China saw this. China was on the very extreme, but a lot of freer countries like South Korea, Spain, Italy, they did this. Now, Spain and Italy did it a little too late, and especially in the United States, it's looking like it might be a little too late in some communities as well. The ultimate goal is to do it at the very beginning. This is how we have successfully stopped prior outbreaks. Ebola, swine flu. We were able to lower that hammer really quickly before the virus could even get a foothold. Now, the next question here is, okay, this sounds extreme. How long are we going to have to do this? Now, originally they were thinking it might be months, it might be August. But recent research suggests a couple of weeks. We could have been done. We could have been wiped out. This would be over. Or would it? And that's where we get into the dance. And this is the dance down here. The way the hammer and the dance works is you immediately squash the virus. You keep it from getting the foothold. But then, in the ensuing year and a half, between when the hammer came down and when the vaccine will finally be available, we have to do what's called a dance, which means you can open back up. for a couple of weeks, a couple of months. People can go back out, they can go to restaurants. Now, there's going to be restrictions. Maybe you have to wear masks, maybe you have to have fewer people in the restaurants, but life can continue, and it can continue quite well. And most importantly, at least here in the United States, where people are getting very frustrated, economies can continue. You can do this very, very well. It'll be different, but it's the only option. And that's what we have to do, is do that dance. Go out for a couple of months, come back in for a little bit. Life will continue, and it will continue quite well, much more than it is. But only if we smash it down with the hammer and then toggle around with the dance. So that's the hammer and the dance. And we know what it is. But what we don't know is whether we need to actually use it here in the US or not. So for that, we're gonna do some good old-fashioned logic testing. Now, if you remember from our last episode when we talked about 1918, we shared a little piece of truth that is objective truth, and that is that viruses are prevented by antibodies. And what I mean by this is that the only way to stop a virus from attacking, from getting in, is to have antibodies, right? And there's two ways to do that. You either do it through vaccine or through herd immunity, which means everybody getting it. But either way, this is it. That's it. It's the only way. So if this is the only way, and if we know that antibodies are created by exposure, what does that tell us? Therefore, that viruses are only prevented by exposure. So if this is true, if this is objectively, logically true, then the question we have to answer next is this: what type of exposure do we want? Do we want a highly controlled exposure that's like a vaccine? Or is it an uncontrolled exposure, which is basically an outbreak, right? There's no control, it goes up, away. It is a spectrum, but at the ends are basically, do you vaccinate of some kind or do you outbreak? These are our choices. So how would you logically figure out where you need to be? Well, for me, on anything, when I want to figure out how severe of a course of action to take, I try to benchmark, right? I try to find something I know has worked well in the past, and then figure out, is the situation I'm dealing with better or worse? And then use that to just kind of benchmark. So that's what we're gonna do here. So let's use something we know very well, and that is the flu. The flu, we know, requires control. We do it every year. We give vaccines. And the flu is probably somewhere here in the middle. There's a little bit of control with the vaccine, but we think it's okay if some people don't have the vaccine, right? Herd immunity will still get us there. So let's look at a few characteristics of the flu. If we were to look at how infectious the flu were and how deadly the flu were and compare COVID to that, this is what we would find. That COVID is much more infectious than the flu. Objectively speaking, this is true. I've seen people try to argue it's not based off incomplete data, non-peer-reviewed journals, and honestly shoddy opinion pieces. But this is true. COVID is more infectious than the flu by at least a level of magnitude, which means 10 times or more. We also know that COVID is more deadly than the flu. But again, you'll have some people using non-peer-reviewed articles, using shoddy journalism to try to say it's not. And objectively, I'm telling you, it is. If you have any information suggesting these things aren't true, that are objective truth, peer-reviewed journal articles, something like that, please share them, because our goal is not to be right. Our goal is to be correct. And that is much more important than just being right about an argument. So please, if you have actual evidence that violates any of these, please share, because that will change our messaging. But until that, the truth we have suggests that these things are true. The flu is our baseline, and it's here, and this disease is more infectious and more deadly than logic truly suggests that we should go to a more controlled scenario. We should not go to a less controlled scenario. Make sense? So now the question is, where does this land us? What do we have so far? We have the logical deduction that we have to get exposure to this virus somehow and that it must be controlled. If we just go out and get it naturally, bad things are going to happen. We also know that if we're able to drop the hammer and do the dance, that we will get to that controlled scenario. We will get to a situation to where we can wait for the vaccine. This is the way to wait for the vaccine. Okay, but as with any bit of objective truth, we have to challenge it. So the final question that we're going to address today is, what if we don't drop the hammer so much? What if we drop the hammer to here? What if we drop the hammer to here? Why do we have to get to the bottom? Because I understand people make very good arguments. The economy is important. We have to open up the economy. So that's the final thing we're going to look at, is what happens if we take half measures? What happens if we do a little bit? And for that, we'll need the backside of this board. So what do we have here? We have a generalization of a tipping point. What this shows us is really any activity that gains steam, any activity that grows. This could be a presidential campaign, or it could be the growth of a disease, or opposite, the stopping of that disease. What this theory suggests is that you spend a lot of energy getting up, getting something to get momentum, right? To get it. And then at some point, it reaches a tipping point. It reaches a point where you don't have to put as much energy in, where it kind of is easy, just like going up a hill on a car, right? Now, the reason I drew this is because on both sides, there are two forces that are working against and with each other to make this happen. Sisyphus is the Greek hero, right, who was damned to spend all eternity rolling a rock up the hill just at the top for the rock to roll back down. He has to do that all the time, right? So the Sisyphus effect is that energy you're pushing to try to get to the top of the hill, right? In a campaign, in a political campaign, it's the knocking on the doors. It's all that energy you have to put into the beginning to get your campaign moving and rolling along. With the disease, it's all the energy it takes to get in a hold. With the fixing of the disease, it's all of that effort to stop it. Fair? Okay. On this side is what's called the snowball effect. Basically means you are going down this hill. If you want to stop it, you got to work really friggin' hard to stop it. Just like over here, if you want to overcome it, you got to work really friggin' hard to overcome it, right? So it's these two forces that basically want you to stay down here. That's what the forces are doing. I want to focus on right here. So, first, I'm going to call it the elephant in the room, and that is, again, this is very phallic shaped. And I am now going to be spending a lot of time focusing on the tip of that phallus. Let's just get our giggles out of the way. There's no way around it. Whenever you're ready, hit play, and we'll keep going. Okay, so what happens here? What happens here is you have these two competing forces basically keeping you at the top of the hill. This is where stagnation comes in. If you don't have enough energy to pull you from here to here, then you just kind of stay here, right? Now what could happen? You could give up and roll back down and be done, right? But most of the time, us humans, we don't want to give up. And when it comes to a disease, we certainly do not want to give up. Because giving up means letting go. It means uncontrolled spread, right? So we do not want to give up. But if we don't have enough energy to pass this, we stay stuck here. I tend to think of Vietnam and even the war on terror, right, as examples of this, right? There wasn't enough to pull over the edge, but we weren't willing to give up. And so this is the death knell for a lot of things. You just kind of get stuck here, and you hear the phrase move the needle, right? This is what they're talking about. They're talking about moving the needle out of this space to get to that snowball, get that exponential growth, get that whatever you're looking for. And it's very hard to get out of here. And this is where I'm going to be very honest. I think the US is stuck here right now. And if we're stuck here, then that means that no dance happens and that no hammer happens. That means that we don't kill 2 million people, but we don't save 2 million people either. Hundreds of thousands of people could potentially die if we're stuck here, right? If we don't have the resolve, the energy to push us over, right? I used a military example earlier with Vietnam and the war on terror. Well, a military example of being able to overcome this is World War II. where everybody grew victory gardens and worked in the mill, that moved the needle over the edge. And we have to see that needle movement here. It will move one way or the other. It will either move because we have pushed it over the top, or it will move because we've given up and the Sisyphus effect was too strong and it pulled us back down towards the bottom. Either way this needle is going to move, we do get a choice in it, but not for long at all. And that's the decision to take into account here. I do have some concrete actions, as well as some other housekeeping things that I mentioned at the beginning. I definitely want you guys' ideas on a few things. But before we do that, this has been pretty heavy. So here's a few seconds of our new cat Ellie playing, because I think we all need to watch some cats do some fun stuff. I just love her. We got Ellie a couple weeks ago. Hopefully you'll be seeing more of her, because she definitely de-stresses us and hopefully is fun on the videos. So here are my initial thoughts, and I'm very curious to see what you think. So thought number one, and this was for me the most important and the most eye-opening and honestly the saddest, and that is there will be no normal until we get a vaccine. There will be no return to old normal for years, if ever. And I really truly think it is our duty to accept that. It is our duty to ourselves and to our fellow citizens to accept that. Because if we don't accept that, then we might try to fight for something that is impossible. And number two, even if we were to drop the hammer immediately and it worked perfectly, we would have to be very careful. Again, there is no return to normal until a vaccine, right? So that's number two. And number three is the action part of this. This is my ask. And to be fair, I went back and forth on this because this show started off being an informational show. This is not let's all, this is not a movement show, but action and movement is needed. And we're not seeing it from our various leaders of any party very much on this, on the hammer and the dance. So my challenge, my ask to myself first, and then to you, is to help in any way you can. Help in any way possible to help lower the hammer. Whether it is making sure that you're washing your hands and wearing a mask and not going out as much, or talking to your family, or making a video, or posting flyers. I don't know. I'm not a leader. This isn't what I do. I'm just scared. A little scared. This is a pretty wild thing. And the powers that we have are responding well. But they are not telling us how hard we need to work, and they're not comforting us. We can do this, but it will take hard work, very hard work. And we haven't done it yet. I really think we haven't done it yet. So that's my ask. Be a part of the hammer. And if anybody wants to start a hashtag or something like that, please let me know. I will be a part of it, and I will be a cheerleader on that. I think those are my thoughts. Okay, I'm gonna get a coffee and then we're gonna do the fun stuff. And so now the fun part. I would really love to build a sort of cohesive language that you and I use to discuss these things, right? For us to kind of build together a standard. What do we look for in objective truth? Right? How do we find that? And then how can we build a way to grade that so that we can easily trust those gradings? And what I'd like your help on is help me flesh this out. What things do you look for in each three of these that suggest to you, okay, I can trust this information? So like for me, for example, things I've already kind of been thinking about are like with the author. I'm gonna look and see What is their background? Do they have any biases? Like, did they work for the oil and natural gas industry for 20 years? Under article, I might look, how old is that article? If it's on a scientific subject and it's 40 years old, well, that might not be relevant anymore and might not be objective truth. Publisher, I might look, does the publisher have a peer review process if it's a journal or something? If it's a news organization, do they have an ethics code that's on their website that they follow, that they openly refer to? Do they have a history of dishonest reporting? Right? Does that make sense? I'd love your help if you'd be willing to. I'd love to, find a way to get it to me. I don't care, right? This is not a drive for comments or anything like that. We have a Facebook page. You can message me. You can leave comments for sure. Yeah, I would love your help. And there's really nothing that I can give other than your thanks and shout outs on the next video, which I will be more than happy to do to anyone that helps and is a part of this community. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great week. And as always, stay safe and be kind to yourselves and the people around us. All right, bye everybody.